Yom Tov, I am Emile Durkheim. Welcome to Socio-Exploration. In this video, I'll guide you through the journey of my life and highlight the key contributions I made to the field of sociology. I was born on April 15, 1858, in the quiet town of Epinal, nestled in the Lorraine region of France. Today, I am remembered as a pioneer of functionalism, a founding father of classical sociology and the father of modern sociology, and more specifically, the father of French sociology, a pioneer of functionalism and a founding father of classical sociology, for I helped transform the study of society into a structured, empirical science. But my journey began in much humbler, more traditional surroundings. My father, Emile Durkheim, was a respected rabbi, as were many of my ancestors. Naturally, it was expected that I would follow in their footsteps. I began my early years immersed in religious study, Hebrew scriptures, sacred traditions, the rhythm of Jewish life. These teachings instilled in me a deep respect for morality, discipline, and the sacred. Yet, even in childhood, a restless curiosity stirred within me. While I held my heritage in great regard, my heart gradually turned toward the secular world, the realm of reason, critical thought, and human society. This journey began in earnest when I left Epinal to study at the Lycée in Nancy, and later at the prestigious École Normale Supérieure in Paris. At the École, I was introduced to the giants of thought, Comte, Kant, Montesquieu. The intellectual atmosphere was electrifying. Though my formal training was in philosophy, I was increasingly drawn to something more urgent, more empirical, the scientific study of social life. I was beginning to envision what would later become the field of sociology. My early academic years were spent in modest towns, Sens, Saint-Quentin, teaching philosophy far from the Parisian spotlight. But in 1887, I was invited to teach social sciences at the University of Bordeaux. It was a bold step. No one quite knew what social science was meant to be, and so I began building it.
In Bordeaux, I started formulating the foundational ideas of sociology. I argued that society is not just a collection of individuals. It is a structure, a system, a force of its own. In 1893, I published The Division of Labor in Society, introducing my concept of social solidarity, both mechanical and organic. 2 years later, in the Rules of Sociological Method, I declared that sociology must be treated as a rigorous empirical science, focused on social facts, things external to the individual that shape behavior. But it was Suicide, 1897, that challenged conventional thinking most boldly. I demonstrated that even a deeply personal act like suicide follows social patterns. Behind each individual tragedy lay broader forces: isolation, moral confusion, societal breakdown. I wasn't diminishing human pain. I was trying to understand its roots.
That same year, I married Louise Dreyfus, a bright and devoted partner. We had 2 children, and though I often lost myself in teaching and writing, my family remained a source of comfort and quiet strength. But tragedy would later strike with the death of my beloved son André, a soldier in the First World War. His death wounded me more deeply than words can express. I never truly recovered. In 1902, I was appointed to the Sorbonne, where I held the first official chair in sociology in France. I founded l'Année Sociologique, a journal that became the center of a growing intellectual movement. I was fortunate to mentor brilliant students, many of whom would carry my work forward after I was gone. I always believed that education is the cornerstone of society, not merely a tool for instruction, but a vehicle for moral development and civic unity. I believe that societies, like individuals, possess a soul, a collective conscience that binds people together. And I feared what could happen when that moral bond frayed. The Great War shattered much of what I had spent my life defending. The moral fabric of Europe seemed torn beyond repair. I died not long after, on November 15, 1917, in Paris, grieving, weary, yet proud. I had given my life to understanding the forces that hold societies together in the hope that such knowledge might help preserve them. Having lived through a time of immense social change, I came to believe that society could no longer be understood through speculation or moral preaching alone. It needed to be studied scientifically. And so I devoted my life to uncovering the deeper structures, forces, and functions that govern social life. Let me now share with you the core theories that shaped my work and laid the foundation for modern sociology. First, to start with, is the theory of social facts. When I speak of social facts, I refer to ways of acting, thinking, and feeling that exist outside the individual, yet exert power over each of us. These are not born within us, but are imposed upon us by the society we live in. Consider the laws that govern our actions, the moral codes that shape our sense of right and wrong, the customs we follow without question, or even the language we speak. None of these are inventions of the individual. They predate us, exist independently of us, and continue after we are gone. I came to see that society is not just a sum of individuals. It is a reality in its own right, with its own structures and forces. Social facts are external to us. They do not originate in the private consciousness, and they are coercive, meaning they have the power to constrain and shape our behavior, whether we recognize it or not. I insisted that these facts must be studied as things, with objectivity and rigor, just as one studies physical phenomena in the natural sciences. This was a radical idea at the time, because it challenged philosophers and psychologists who believed all behavior could be explained by individual will or inner states. But I believed, and still do, that sociology must be a distinct science, one that studies society not through speculation, but by observing these facts and the invisible forces behind them. Through this framework, I sought to reveal the deeper order of society, the patterns and pressures that silently govern our collective life. In my early work, particularly in the Division of Labor in Society, 1893, I explored the very foundation of social cohesion, what binds individuals together to form a functioning society. I came to see that solidarity, the moral glue of society, takes on different forms depending on the structure and complexity of that society. In simpler, traditional societies where people share similar work, beliefs, and lifestyles, what I called mechanical solidarity prevails. In such communities, the individual is not yet fully distinct from the group. The collective conscience dominates and unity arises from likeness. But as societies grow more complex and industrialized, we begin to witness the rise of organic solidarity. Here, cohesion does not come from similarity, but from difference. Individuals become more specialized in their roles, farmers, teachers, engineers, artists, and through this interdependence, society holds together. It may seem paradoxical, but in modern societies, it is precisely our differences that unite us. The division of labor, far from being a purely economic function, is a social one. It creates bonds among people by making them rely on one another. My argument was clear. As society evolves, it does not lose its solidarity. Rather, the form of that solidarity transforms. Mechanical solidarity gives way to organic solidarity, and though the nature of cohesion changes, its importance remains just as vital. This understanding was my attempt to explain the moral structure of modern life, not merely how society works, but why it holds together in the face of increasing individualism. As I delved deeper into the social causes of suicide in my work, Suicide, 1897, I uncovered a condition that I named anomie, a state of normlessness. I saw it as a disturbing rupture in the social fabric, a condition where the norms and values that normally guide behavior weaken or vanish altogether. This does not occur randomly. It arises especially during times of rapid social and economic change, such as industrialization, sudden prosperity, or economic collapse. In such periods, the rules that once defined right and wrong, success and failure, restraint and desire begin to dissolve. Individuals are left adrift, no longer sure of their place, purpose, or limits. In a stable society, norms serve as moral anchors. But in an anomic society, individuals are overcome by endless desires, unregulated ambitions, and a sense of alienation. I found that anomie was a major cause of suicide, not because people had no goals, but because they had too many, without structure or limits. Their expectations stretched far beyond what society could reasonably satisfy, leaving them frustrated and empty. Anomie, then, is not merely a personal feeling. It is a social pathology. It reflects a failure of collective regulation. I introduced this concept not just to explain suicide, but to reveal a broader truth. When the moral order breaks down, individuals suffer and society begins to unravel. It is the task of sociology to diagnose such disorders and help restore balance in the moral life of the community.
When I began studying suicide, many believed it was purely a personal act, driven by psychological distress or private sorrow. But I asked a different question. What if suicide is shaped not just by the individual, but by society itself? In my work, Suicide, 1897, I approached this tragedy as a social phenomenon, not just a private decision. By comparing suicide rates across different regions, religions, and social groups, I discovered clear patterns that could not be explained by individual motives alone. I found that the real causes lay in how well or poorly people were integrated and regulated by their societies. I identified 4 types of suicide, each arising from a specific imbalance in the social fabric. First, there is egoistic suicide, which occurs when individuals are too loosely integrated into society. When people feel disconnected, alienated from family, religion, or community, they lose the sense of meaning that these bonds provide. This, I observed, was more common among Protestants than Catholics, due to the more individualistic nature of Protestant life. Next is altruistic suicide, the opposite extreme. Here, the individual is so deeply absorbed into the group that their own identity disappears. Think of the soldier who dies for his country, or the elderly person in some tribal cultures who willingly ends their life for the good of the community. These acts come from excessive integration. The third type is anomic suicide, born from a breakdown of social regulation, what I described earlier as anomie. When society fails to set clear moral limits, such as during sudden wealth or economic collapse, people are left in a state of disorientation. Their desires become boundless, their goals unstable, and many are driven to despair. Finally, there is fatalistic suicide, less common, but no less real. It occurs when individuals are too tightly regulated, when their futures are so oppressively controlled that they see no hope. Prisoners, slaves, and those in repressive institutions may fall victim to this form. What I proved, I believe, was revolutionary. Suicide is not merely an individual matter. It is a mirror reflecting the health of society. The more we understand these social forces, the better we can prevent such tragedies and rebuild a more balanced moral order.
Throughout my work, I returned again and again to a central truth. Society is not merely a collection of individuals. It has a soul. I call this the collective conscience, the totality of beliefs, morals, and values shared by members of a society. It is the invisible force that binds us together, shaping not only how we behave, but how we think and feel. You see, when we participate in shared customs, rituals, and laws, we are not just acting as individuals. We are participating in something greater than ourselves, the moral fabric of society. In traditional societies, the collective conscience is strong, deeply rooted, and highly uniform. People share the same religion, customs, and worldview. It is this powerful, shared moral code that allows for mechanical solidarity, a unity based on similarity. In contrast, modern societies, with their diversity and specialization, experience a more complex form of solidarity. The collective conscience still exists, but it becomes more abstract, more general, less about what we all do the same, and more about the moral principles that allow us to coexist in difference. I believe that the health of any society depends on the strength and clarity of its collective conscience. When it weakens, when people no longer feel bound by shared values, social disorder begins to emerge. Crime, deviance, and isolation are all signs of this moral weakening. And yet, the collective conscience is not static. It evolves. It can be reinforced through education, rituals, national symbols, even law. That is why I viewed education not simply as the transmission of knowledge, but as a moral training, a way to shape individuals to live harmoniously within the larger group. In studying the collective conscience, I was not idealizing society, but trying to understand its moral engine. Without it, we are isolated and aimless. With it, we become something more, a people. Of all the social institutions I studied, religion fascinated me the most, not because of theological concerns, but because of what it revealed about society itself. In my work, The Elementary Forms of Religious Life, 1912, I turned to the most basic and ancient forms of religion, such as totemism among Australian Aboriginal tribes, to uncover the essence of all religious life. What I found, and what I firmly believe, is that religion is not born of divine revelation, but of society. It is, at its core, a reflection of the collective life of a community. You see, when people come together in rituals, when they chant, pray, or partake in sacred ceremonies, they are not simply communing with a god. They are reaffirming their connection to each other. In such moments, they feel elevated, part of something greater than themselves. That something is society. The totem, the god, the sacred object, these are all symbols of the group itself, made powerful through collective belief. Religion, then, is society worshipping itself. I made a crucial distinction between the sacred and the profane. The sacred includes things set apart, revered, and treated with awe, things that are off limits in everyday life. The profane, on the other hand, refers to the ordinary, mundane aspects of existence. The line between these is not given by nature, it is drawn by society. This separation is what gives religion its power to shape our moral life and emotional bonds. Far from being irrational or outdated, religion performs essential social functions. It strengthens group solidarity, reinforces moral norms, and gives individuals a sense of meaning and belonging. Even in secular societies, this function does not disappear. It simply takes new forms. Nationalism, civil religion, even collective mourning or celebration, they all tap into the same fundamental need for shared symbols and collective rituals. So, while I myself moved away from personal faith, I came to see religion as one of the most profound expressions of society's moral and emotional life. It is not merely a belief in gods, it is the binding force that turns individuals into a unified moral community. Education, to me, has always been more than just the transmission of knowledge or the teaching of technical skills. It is, first and foremost, a moral institution. In every society, education serves a vital function. It prepares the individual to live as a member of the social group. It is through schools, more than any other institution, that society molds the young minds to internalize its norms, values, and shared beliefs. In other words, education is how the collective conscience is passed from one generation to the next. From an early age, I was convinced that modern, secular societies could no longer rely on religion alone to shape moral behavior. Yet, the need for moral regulation, for a common framework of right and wrong, remains just as strong. This is where education must step in, not to indoctrinate, but to cultivate a sense of responsibility, discipline, cooperation, and respect for the social order. These qualities are not innate, they must be taught. And they must be taught not by harsh authority, but by nurturing the student's capacity to understand and value social life. Teachers, therefore, hold a sacred responsibility. They are not merely instructors, they are moral guides. They shape not just intellects, but consciences. In my lectures and writings, I insisted that the teacher's role is to create a classroom where social rules are respected, where justice is practiced, and where the student begins to understand the obligations of life in community. I argued that education reflects the nature of society itself. In more traditional societies, it emphasizes conformity and shared beliefs. In modern ones, it must emphasize individuality balanced by mutual respect. But in both cases, the goal is the same: to produce a moral being capable of contributing to the collective good. In studying education sociologically, I wanted to show that moral development is not simply a matter of religion or parental guidance. It is the deliberate, collective effort of society to form its future members. Without that effort, we risk raising generations who are intelligent but socially adrift, individuals without a compass. And so I say, if we care for the future of our societies, we must care deeply about how we educate our children, not just in facts, but in values. My major publications are first, The Division of Labor in Society, 1893. This was my first major work, where I introduced my idea of social solidarity. I argued that as societies evolve, they move from mechanical solidarity, based on sameness, to organic solidarity, based on interdependence due to the division of labor. I wanted to show that the complexity of modern life didn't weaken society, it simply changed the way people are connected. Second, The Rules of Sociological Method, 1895. Here, I laid out the foundations of sociology as a scientific discipline. I introduced the concept of social facts and insisted that sociologists must treat these facts as things, objective realities external to the individual. This work was my response to those who believed sociology should remain a branch of philosophy or psychology. I wanted it to stand firmly on its own. Third, Suicide, 1897. This book was a breakthrough, not just for me, but for the discipline. For the first time, I applied sociological methods to a deeply personal and tragic act. I showed that suicide has social causes and can be classified into types based on the levels of integration and regulation in society: egoistic, altruistic, anomic, and fatalistic. It was a bold claim, and one that proved sociology's power to explain even the most individual behaviors. Fourth, The Elementary Forms of Religious Life, 1912. In what I consider my most mature work, I turned to religion not to debate theology, but to understand how and why religion exists in all societies. I studied totemism in Aboriginal Australia to uncover the social origins of religion, and I concluded that religion is society worshipping itself. Through ritual and belief, people create the shared meanings and moral bonds that hold them together. Fifth, Education and Sociology, published posthumously in 1922. Though I did not live to prepare this work myself, my lectures and ideas on education were gathered and published after my death. I argued that education is the means by which society instills its moral values in the young. It is not just about teaching knowledge, it is about shaping citizens. Sixth, Moral Education, published posthumously in 1925. This collection of lectures dives deeper into how schools must develop the moral character of students. I emphasize discipline, a sense of belonging, and the cultivation of autonomy as essential parts of moral training in modern societies. Seventh, Sociology and Philosophy, published posthumously in 1924. This work includes essays and reflections that further explore the boundaries and connections between sociology and philosophy. While I respected philosophy, I remained convinced that sociology needed its own methods and subject matter, grounded in empirical study. I was no prophet. I was a man of questions, not revelations. But if my voice still echoes, let it remind you of this. We are not isolated beings. We are threads woven into the vast fabric of collective life. To truly understand ourselves, we must understand the society that shapes us. Do like, subscribe, and click the bell icon for further notifications. Todave Yom Tov.